Let's see here. Hello, hello. Give me a second here to turn some lights on and get situated. I'm not really sure how to turn it off from showing people's screen things, but it's fine with me if it's fine with you. Just want to give you that heads up that it will show in the recording as well. Need something to prop this up on, and then I'll be ready to go. Nope. Sorry, I didn't have this ready. One second, just grabbing a crate to prop my computer up on, and then we will be ready. All right, we are good to go. It's very cold in the cabin right now, so I'm a little late. Had to run over here since this is where we have high-speed internet and get a fire going. All right, we don't have many questions this month, which is good because I need to cut things a little bit short today, but they are very complex questions that require some pretty big answers. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat if you need to, or even after the live Q&A, you're always welcome to do that as well. Let's see, I need to pull it up on here too because I've got a few links I'm gonna be sending you guys, or maybe I'll just post them in the recording. Alrighty. I am going to get through the one easy question first before I dive into the more complex one. So let me find my spot. All right. So to get started, I'm going to answer the questions. One was about treating and helping to heal a brown recluse bite or other nasty spider bites like maybe black widow, and also recommending support or treatment for toenail fungus. So let's see. I'm going to give you the rundown of how we treat these things in our household. Naturally, we use our products. That's how our products are kind of made, is evolving from remedies that we make at home. That said, I'll go over why we use them so you can reach for something you might already have that's similar, or maybe you have some of the ingredients that are in our remedies. So just keep that in mind. I'm never trying to like plug our brand or anything. It's just literally how I do things at home. So brown recluses are very prevalent in Tennessee. This is something that I have a lot of experience with. And little disclaimer, sometimes you simply need to seek treatment, especially if your symptoms of the brown, like if you know you've been bit by a brown recluse. An example would be my nephew put his shoe on, got bit by a spider. They were able to shake out the brown recluse. Therefore, they saw that it was a brown recluse. If you don't know that you've been bit by a poisonous spider that can cause these festering wounds, then you might not have those symptoms show up for several days, in which case you might be dealing with an infection. And at that point, you might need to just seek medical treatment. So what I'm telling you is how you can prevent needing medical treatment, how you can work on healing these wounds at home, but just throwing that out there that sometimes you simply need to go So the first thing I would do if you think you have a spider bite, or if you know you have been bit by a spider, is to draw a ring around the redness. That way you can keep an eye on the redness spreading, color change, how big that ring is, etc. And that will be a key indicator for you of possible infection. The other very first thing you want to do is clean it. And of course, you can do that simply with soap and water. What we do is use our herbal wound wash at home, which has antimicrobial, antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal herbs in it. So we choose to use that as sort of a disinfectant for really any sort of potentially infected wound or potentially poisonous bite. So that's going to help disinfect and clean the area, and is also going to provide some of that herbal treatment. So let's see. Okay, so after washing it, what we're doing at home is using our black drawing salve. And you can make a black drawing salve or just a black drawing, what's the word here? A poultice, very easily. So just to go over what this is, oh wait, that's our antifungal. Black drawing salve is literally black because you're using, the main ingredient is activated charcoal. Activated charcoal is incredible for drawing impurities, venom, splinters, etc. So activated charcoal is for sure something that you want to have on hand in your first aid kit. Now, the cool thing about drawing salves is that you're able to take all these ingredients and then mix them with pine sap, and sap is also really good at help drawing things out, and it's also incredibly antimicrobial, and it also sort of seals things off. It creates like a breathable seal to help from any other impurities or bacteria entering that area. So I highly recommend making or buying a black drawing salve. The other ingredients here, we've got pine tar, spruce pitch, green clay, activated charcoal, yarrow, and plantain. So if you don't have the salve, but you have any of those things at home, you're really just going to want to create a paste or a poultice, maybe cover it with gauze or plastic wrap if that's all you've got, to really keep it on there. A clay, you can use bentonite clay, green clay, any sort of clay, and the activated charcoal are going to be the main drawing components, followed by the pine sap, and then those other herbs that are in there, yarrow and plantain, just like the other herbs that are in the wound wash, are just going to provide some itch relief, some soothing, some anti-inflammatory relief, just all those nasty things that come along with the symptoms of having been bit by a poisonous spider. So yeah, the combination of those things should help keep it clean and prevent infection while also soothing. Let's see. Okay, so to answer the question about toenail fungus, for the most part, whether you're dealing with toenail fungus, athlete's foot, any sort of fungal anything, there is a beautiful, vast amount of herbs you can use called antifungals. So this is one of those things where you don't have to necessarily seek out 3 specific ingredients. As long as you've got antifungal ingredients, those will be very helpful. My biggest recommendation to you is going to be, since it is on your foot, doing soaks. And I would do an Epsom salt and vinegar soak, but you're also going to want to create an herbal tea. So what I would do is get a bucket of some sort, a 5-gallon bucket, a pot, something you can soak your feet in. You are going to want to use some vinegar. You can use white vinegar, apple cider vinegar, homemade vinegar, cheap vinegar, it doesn't matter. Epsom salts or just plain old salts. And then your water is going to be the tea that you're making. So it is best to do it with hot. So creating this all at once is great. But if you don't have that option, that's fine too. So some herb options for you to create your tea would be, number one, I would absolutely recommend black walnut. And on that note, our wound wash spray is going to be a great option for you as well, because it does have some of these antifungal herbs like black walnut and yarrow. So black walnut, yarrow, usnea, echinacea, wormwood, mugwort, eucalyptus, chaparral, sage, lavender, pine sap. So those are just some of my immediate options that I would use. Any of those steeped, I would say 15 to 30 minutes would be great. Strain them out, pour it in your foot soak with vinegar and salt. I would do that honestly once a week, depending on how bad it is. If it's not that bad, it doesn't bother you that much, and you're not super concerned with knocking it out as fast as possible, then you might not have to do it that much. But if you're wanting to like get rid of it, I would absolutely do it once a week. And I would also be applying antifungal herbs nightly. So another salve that I brought to show for this is our antifungal salve. And this has got, I just grabbed the wrong one again, antifungal dry balm. And this has got chaparral, usnea, yarrow, sagebrush, Russian sage, lavender, juniper, black walnut hull, larch sap. So incredibly antifungal herbs in here. This is going to be wonderful for something like that. So doing your rotating foot soaks and applying herbs, particularly a salve. The thing about salves is that you can make them really thick with beeswax, which is going to help them stay in place and create that breathable seal again, to really make sure those herbs are penetrating the affected area. You can create an antifungal salve at home or a spray, just like our wound wash would be great. But that's an important part. And then for anyone who is dealing with athlete's foot and listening to this, I would absolutely recommend those same things. But there is one more thing that I recommend for that, and that is creating an antifungal powder, which if any of you have ever bought our hair powder, you've maybe noticed the label on it that says all of the other uses for it. And the reason for that is that how I make that is I take freshly dried herbs and I powder them. And a lot of the herbs that are in that blend are incredibly antibacterial and antifungal. We've got eucalyptus, sage, lavender, juniper, and yarrow, and wormwood. I mean, so many. So the cool thing about that powder, it's of course amazing for what it's made for, which is being like a dry shampoo, but we use that powder in so many other ways. My husband uses it in his shoes for occasional athlete's foot and just to freshen his shoes up. We use it in our chicken dust bath area just to add some of that antifungal, anti-parasitic to their dust bath. I won't get into all the uses, but creating a powder like that from powdered dried herbs is also a great idea for putting in your slippers, maybe even just a sock to wear around the house. Because a lot of times with fungal things, we really want to keep it dry, because sweating and moistness, that can really perpetuate the issue. Alrighty, I'm going to go to the most complex question here that's going to take me a minute, and that was a question about herbal abortion. So the question specifically was, hey, Tori, can you talk about herbal assisted abortions / pregnancy release? I listened to a podcast about the topic recently on medicine stories, and it really piqued my interest. Do you have any thoughts, wisdom, etc. on the use of herbs for pregnancy release? And do you ever see yourself offering products that can be used for this purpose? I will start by saying I will not offer products for this. The main reason being, this is something that you really need a doula for. You need someone who is going to not only either create or assist you in creating these remedies, but hold you accountable for sticking to it. because herbal assisted abortions are very involved. You are taking supplements, drinking teas, taking tinctures pretty much 24/7. You literally have to set timers for throughout the night to wake up and take those remedies. So it's really important that you are committed, you are consistent, you have absolutely everything you need, and that you're taking it very seriously. It's not like other supplements, tinctures, and teas where you can buy it and there's like a small listed thing on the label that's like recommended daily dose, a half to one full dropper as needed. It's super involved. And herbalists in general, but especially clinical herbalists like myself, we are not legally allowed to give that type of medical advice without working one-on-one, which is why working with an herbalist one-on-one or some sort of abortion doula is the best way to do this. And the cool thing about Amber's podcast and a lot of the resources that she mentions on there is that a lot of them are free, because I think a lot of people here work with an herbalist or a doula and they're thinking, well, shit, that's going to cost a lot of money, which might even be your reason for not doing a medically assisted abortion in the first place. So just to make sure everyone knows that there are free sliding scale, cost-effective ways to do it. It's just not the kind of thing where we can just sell products that say anything about abortion on it and hope that people do it right. They can be incredibly dangerous, and that's an important thing to note. If you are taking herbs to help assist in an abortion, and then you aren't able to release that child, you absolutely need to have a backup plan, because those herbs are incredibly strong and will undoubtedly have negative effects on the fetus. So it's not the kind of thing where you can try it and if it doesn't work, okay. No, you must have a backup plan. Another important thing to note is that under 50% of herbal abortions work. I'm getting all the negative stuff out of the way, but I would like to say here that I 100,000 billion% support herbal abortions. I have assisted in an herbal abortion before. I myself would use herbs to induce an abortion if I needed to. But there are a lot of very scary things that you need to be conscious of and think of and plan for. I would say planning is the absolute most important part of an herbal assisted abortion. So, Amber posts a bunch of resources in the podcast that I'm going to post for you all. But I also have a couple myself that I'll post that I've used before. A lot of her resources are free, which is really nice. She's got, people you can contact for support groups, books, etc. And then here's just a couple facts I wrote down for you guys. Herbal abortions typically take anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks of regular, consistent dosing. You will need to take your teas, tinctures, and capsules at intervals throughout the day and night. The idea is to keep a constant level of herbs circulating throughout the body. Let's see. Oh, big major disclaimer. If you have liver or kidney issues of any kind, you should not attempt using herbal abortions. The reason behind that we will get to soon, which is the type of herbs that we use to help us release this. Let's see. Another thing about herbal abortion is that it needs to be started incredibly soon. And so it seems that herbal abortions work best for people who are sort of having a natural lifestyle anyways, which would hopefully mean that you are keeping track of your period, you track your fertility, you're familiar with your cycle, you would kind of know if something was off. And the idea is to start taking these herbs as soon as you miss your period. If you are not wanting a pregnancy and you're a day late, you would start then. ideally. Now, you can start a little later. It is not recommended to start unless it's been a week or less after your period, missed period. Let's see. So another important thing, if you are interested in kind of thumbing through these resources, reading about what herbs to use, etc., is you're not going to want to look at all these herbs and go, okay, cool, I'm going to tincture all these and create this one tincture formula, because no, a lot of these herbs have different forms they need to be extracted. Some are teas, some are powdered supplements, some are extracted in oil, some are tinctured. So please, please, please make sure that you do an intense amount of research to not only find out which herbs you want to use, which herbs would work best for you, if there's any contraindications with medications that you might be on, but the extraction of these herbs. All right, so here's an interesting thing, and I will make note of this as well on the recording. So what you're looking for is 4 different herbal actions, and you can't just have 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, you need 4 out of 4. And I'm going to tell you what they are, but also to know in this resource list of links that Amber put together, someone has created this incredible diagram that lists out all the herbs that have these 4 herbal actions. So you can kind of look through and choose based on making sure you have at least one of each in these 4 categories. So the 4 categories are: 1, an emmenagogue, which promotes bleeding; 2, an oxytocic, increases prostaglandins, I don't think I've ever said that out loud, which promote uterine contractions; 3, a progesterone blocker. Progesterone develops the fetus and effectively organizes the tissues. 4, a cervical softener, which helps open the cervix and allows the passage. So that's very important, and that diagram is very helpful. So I think that's all I really had to say on that. Just to kind of say a few more of my personal opinions on it, I think that as we're realizing more and more every day, what is the proper way to say this? That we actually don't have total control over our bodies. And at any moment, laws could be passed, things could happen that take away that sovereignty and endanger our ability to be the sole maker of decisions for our bodies. It's a very, very scary thing. So even if you are not needing an herbal abortion, if you are welcoming pregnancy, to me, if this piques your interest, it's important that you put together these resources, do a little research, familiarize yourself with this, because we all know the statistics about women, rape, and many other horrible things that can factor into an undesired pregnancy. And we probably all know more than one person who has encountered these things or has had an abortion, maybe you. So to me, it's incredibly important to be well versed in these things. And what I really desire in life is to create a community, a sustainable, functioning community. And what that would mean is you have someone in your network that knows how to do everything that a person may need in life. And having someone in your community that is experienced in herbal abortion, assisting in abortion, is invaluable. So if it interests you at all, please run with that interest because people need you. So that was just the last thing I wanted to say there. All right, believe it or not, we're on to the last question. So the last question, could you elaborate on land stewardship versus land management methods on your homestead? Namely, how to assist in plantifestation, as I've heard you say. So a lot of times, land stewardship and land management are considered the same thing. Most of the time, you'll see land stewardship and management as like one sentence, one category. So what I think you mean is describing the difference in being in relation with land and man-made alterations in land that are unnecessary. So I'm going to sort of read a brief definition of stewardship. Stewardship means actively working with the land and the community to protect and restore the different native habitats, creeks, wildlife corridors, productive farms and ranches, and permanently protecting private lands that are under our care. Developing innovative projects to improve and heal treasured landscapes through tidal wetland restoration, planting native trees and shrubs along creeks and streams, removing barriers to steelhead migration and wildlife movement, in addition to keeping buildings and roads in good repair, managing vegetation to reduce the risk of wildfire, and controlling invasive weeds. Land stewardship involves keeping soils, native vegetation, and water bodies intact and healthy, which also benefits wildlife and their habitats. That's the key for us. One way ranchers achieve these goals is strategically grazing cattle and other livestock to maintain perennial, natural vegetation and habitat. Closely managing stocking density and grazing duration can produce multiple benefits on land. Approaches that farmers use to steward cropland includes using cover crops in between growing seasons and reducing tillage to protect their soil. So I'm gonna link a link to the book Tending the Wild and the film Tending the Wild. These specifically take place in California. I'm in Tennessee. I just kind of take the ideas and think about how to apply them to my situation. That book and of course Braiding Sweetgrass have been completely influential to how we steward our land. The thing that really piqued me into homesteading was land stewardship and the idea that growing food, growing herbs, raising livestock, composting, making natural products, having a pond, creek, river, etc. nearby, all of those things affect each other. And if you are running a sustainable homestead and living in relation and stewardship with your land, all of those things should actually be kind of like domino assisting the other one in keeping it all going with as little alterations by you, the humans, as possible. And what that means is the idea that, okay, if you are going to be having a small farm or a small garden, growing herbs, maybe food for one family of 5 or less, etc., you can really produce your own soil through composting, leaf litter, etc., animal feces. And you can do that without tilling and disrupting the soil. And a few ways that animals can help do that is one, I'm just going to run you guys through what we do, which was part of the question. So our goats are in one main area and they poop a lot. And we rake that weekly into one area that we then don't touch. And naturally, that feces hay leaf mixture is breaking down all the time. And then about once every couple months, we will relocate that into a soil pile. And in that soil pile is a mixture of that feces compost and our food compost. And we are constantly turning that soil. And then the idea is that we're doing that all year. And when we're ready to do our spring and fall gardening, we have our beautiful, rich compost soil. No money involved. And the only alterations from the humans is relocation and sifting. But here's the other cool thing. We don't even really have to do that sifting because we have chickens. I don't like letting the chickens sift through goat poop because of bacteria. However, we do have a separate compost area for our veggie scraps. And there's a few different kinds of ways you can compost. Some people have an enclosed compost, which is ideal if you live in a neighborhood or you deal with like coyotes, stray dogs, etc. But we have a compost that's close to our house that is an open compost. So it's got 4 sides, one of those sides being a gate, and the top is exposed. Now, what happens is birds come and pick and eat it, and our chickens go inside of it and they scrape, they turn it over, they kick, they pick out what they want, and they're constantly turning that compost for us. That is feeding our chickens and turning the compost. Pretty freaking awesome. So these are just some examples of like kind of sustainable homesteading efforts. Things evolving other things with little to no human touch. Now, all of this is happening on about 2 acres, which is on that 2 acres is like our house, our garden plots, the goats, the chickens, the composting, our shed, our driveway. Around that 2 acres is another 6.5 acres, and that 6.5 acres is wild. Now, when I think about like stewarding the land, that to me is the land that I'm stewarding. And what that specifically means is, where do I begin here? This is such a complex topic. So let's talk about, if you read Tending the Wild or you watch the broadcast of it, you will hear about colonizing and decolonizing wilderness. And essentially what that means is that when America or Turtle Island was strictly indigenous, the land was being managed or stewarded by indigenous people. They were doing things like controlled burning, removing invasive species, which they didn't deal with much of before being colonized, harvesting plants for basket weaving, rope making, house building, food, medicine, etc. And when America was colonized by Europeans brought with them their food and medicine plants that they thought they would need. And that's where we see a lot of these like Japanese honeysuckle, mimosa, kudzu, there's shit tons, bamboo, all these invasive ass plants that are from other countries. The cool thing to note here is that a lot of invasive plants are medicinal or edible, because that's why they were brought here in the first place. Now, there are some plants that are invasive that were strictly brought here as ornamental for like trade value or just beautifying land. But most of them were brought as food or medicine. So that's why we can use so many invasive plants. And using invasive plants is for sure part of our land stewardship. I feel like I'm all over the place. Let me think back to where I started. So what I'm saying here is that Turtle Island, when inhabited strictly by indigenous people, was a well-oiled machine. It was people taking from the land, using these plants for all of their needs, and giving back by managing the land. So what I always tell people is this: if you are a true plant person who is enchanted by plants and what they can do for you, who is using plants for food, for medicine, maybe for your livestock, for your children, your family, yourself, then you love and respect those plants so much, you are relying on them for your needs. They become an important, integral part of your life. No plant person that does all those things I just mentioned is going to go into nature and just rip up every last bit of it, take every last thing. Why? Because then it's not going to be there when you need it next. If you need that plant, if you're using it in that way, then you're always thinking about coming back for more. You rely on it. You need it to be there for you. So you're not going to take all of it. You're going to be concerned with making sure that it shows up year after year after year, and that you're getting bigger and bigger and healthier harvests. Only, how do I say this without going too hard? Only patriarchal bullshit, money hungry, capitalist fuckers are going out and taking all of something. Why? Because they're not living in relation with that land. They don't give a shit if that plant is there when they go back, as long as they're able to take all the sage, all the golden seal, all the ashwagandha, whatever plant is hip at that time, turn it into a product for consumers and make money, and then they'll never think of it again. And there are these businesses right now who are wildcrafting, that are literally traveling to public land, natural spaces, and raping the land, meaning taking everything and leaving nothing. That is colonizer shit. So decolonizing landscapes is the idea of land stewardship, which is simply the idea of living in relation with land. It is the most simple, basic idea that is in our DNA. You naturally want to see these things thrive and flourish if you're relying on them. That is living in relation. And so what we learn from indigenous people is, and through books like Braiding Sweetgrass and Tending the Wild, is that before being colonized, these people were using tons of sweetgrass, tons of sage, tons of willow. And you look at a demographic map of tribes today that are using those things, and we see the most sage, willow, and sweetgrass in those areas, because these people have been living in relation with these plants, observing the way they grow, observing and experimenting with which harvesting techniques leave enough of the plant to continue growing and encourage growth. So to me, land stewardship is spending enough time on a piece of land to observe what's going on. If you do that, you don't need to read a book about invasive plant species, because you will visibly see invasive plant species choking out native plant species. Well, the nice thing to do would be to carefully remove that invasive species that's taking over this fragile native plant. The nice thing to do would be to dig its roots up and try to get rid of it completely, so that it doesn't continue spreading and taking over these gentle, fragile native plants. If I find skullcap in my woods, which this is reeling back into the note of plantifestation, which is, I think, something I coined, which is that I've lived on my land for 6 years. I think I might be less than that. I have walked every foot of that land. Skullcap has been my favorite plant for years. I have never seen skullcap on my land before until this year. And it wasn't just in one patch, it was everywhere. That's what we call a plantifestation. Anyways, when I saw that skullcap and actually blueberry, wild blueberry for the first time, they were deep in the woods, totally canopied by trees. Well, these are two plants that really like sunshine. So I trimmed those trees back. I didn't remove them, I trimmed them back so that those plants would get the sunshine that they needed, because I see that that's what they need. I see that their growth has been stunted from shade. Another interesting thing is that tree removal was pretty freaking normal for indigenous people. Planting trees in areas that have been deforested is very important. But on land like mine that has been wild for 50 years, maybe more, maybe less, it's actually kind of more necessary that you remove some saplings. I think the indigenous rule of thumb is 13 trees per acre. And we have 25 to 50 per acre from our land having not been managed before us or stewarded. And that again is an invasive thing. We have tons of invasive non-native saplings spreading through our land. So I hope that that answers the question, because this is a very complex topic that does not have a simple answer. To me, it's something that, sure, it can maybe be taught, you know, but not really. It can't be like memorized. You have to experience living in relation with plants, with land, with trees. You have to have at least one of those things be something you eat or use for medicine, something you rely on. I think that's it. On the note of planifestation, I don't know how it happens. I really don't. The only thing that I can really think of is the birds and the bees. I mean, I know, and the goats. I know that when I compost herbs and my goats are eating, we also feed our goats herbs, and the chickens, when they're eating those things and pooping out seeds potentially, I know that that can be a way of planting things. But I also think, you know, birds that are migrating, foxes, coyotes, all these, you know, parts of the same land that we live on, who knows where they're traveling from and whose garden they were munching on. But yeah, I think that's just one of those things that's purely magic and can't fully be described. Anyways, I am gonna go. I hope this has been helpful. I have a lot of links and resources for you guys from these 3 questions. So when I post the recording to Patreon later, if you want to check any of those links and resources out, that's where they'll be. So thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you for asking questions, and I'll see you next time.